Hello and welcome to Deft and Dorky. We're gonna talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about it. We're not gonna play it.
We
I
don't play
miss
it
that.
anymore.
Yeah, we don't play it anymore. It was sad.
Hopefully we will again sometime. Who knows?
Stupid fools moving. Idiot.
What were you thinking?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I ask that every day.
Um, Today we are talking about making your own campaign.
Oh,
We'll
what?
dig into that a little bit. So,
Yeah.
I guess where do you want to start with that?
Okay, so there's a number of. I actually wrote down all those questions because, full transparency, I've only ever run pre-written modules. Isaac here just finished with his second campaign that he made himself, which is tremendous.
Yay!
But I have an interest in making mine, and I have kind of like a loose structure of a campaign in my mind. So I was gonna just do kind of a bit of a Q&A because I don't have any experience in this, and you have all the experience in this.
All the
And so all the two, but they both went long.
They
Like
did.
how many
They
up?
both long.
Like how many sessions did we do each?
I think it was around, like, I think it averaged out to just around 60 or a little over
For each.
each.
And like if you think about that, that's a year plus if
Yeah.
you play every week, which we do not. Which honestly, that is a big ask, especially if you're not playing locally. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and each of those averaged between 3 and 4 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
On
And
average.
also, we have 7 people to coordinate schedules with. Like, that's insane. Um, so it is kind of a big deal actually. Like, that is huge. So, and you ran some pre-written, like when you were getting your training wheels. Kinda off the
Yeah,
ground.
I ran the starter, whatever, not the Mines of Fandelver, the other starter pack, the
Ice,
Ice
Ice
Dragon,
Fire,
Ice
Ice
Dragon Peak.
Dragon of Ice Spider Peak. Yeah.
Yeah, I ran
Dragon
that
of Ice
one,
Spire.
and I've run like a couple one shots that were pre-written.
So
I
let's.
I started Tomb of Annihilation, but that group fell apart. So,
As is want to do. Um, but sometimes one of your players is stupid and moves across the country. Time zones, I hate it. All right. So let's start there. Like,
okay.
you've had experience doing both.
Hmm.
For you, like, what are some of the big differences between pre-written, like both in like preparing for and running pre-written versus your own conception?
For me, the big difference is that for the pre-writtens, I tend to want to, like, do it right, quote unquote right, like the way that the book has it out, which is something that you can adjust. Noted, I admit that you can adjust that, but it's not. I'm not. It doesn't function in my brain properly to do that too much. So that's the big thing for me, is that, like, if I'm going to prep a pre-written, I want to have, like, read the entire book, and then the hard part is that there's a lot of things that I will forget over the course of a week, depending on where the players are going, and I want to know what NPCs know what, should they happen to run into them. Whereas writing my own, I am able to, because I've made all the NPCs, I know, like, their backstories essentially, or their sort of Schrodinger knowledge, if you will. Like, do they know? Is there a possibility for them to know whatever the PCs ask of them?
Mm-hmm.
So I can put those little clues and stuff in different spots because I understand how the whole thing fits together. Whereas when I was trying to read through the Tomb of Annihilation, it was really difficult for me to try to hold that whole tapestry in my head.
Like it was kind of like too wieldy.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, there's a lot going on, and
Unwieldy.
part of that is my own, like, lack of experience, because at that time I was in the middle of the first campaign, so I wasn't too experienced with running a campaign at all at the time. but like learning how to roll with your players, asking questions that you did not anticipate. I would imagine I'll do better at it now, but still, that's the sort of the part that I had trouble with. As far as like satisfaction, the ones that I write myself are way more fulfilling, just because of the creative process, I guess.
Yeah. Like for you, like why in the first place, or like I want to do this.
Oh, you like, why do I want to write as opposed to
Yeah, like
read?
what was the appeal? Wow.
Um,
Because
I
it
don't
seems
know.
like a big undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed creative writing,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been a big fan of like Star Trek and stuff that has like sort of allegorical ties, where you can look at humanity through a different lens to where it's not so on the nose, I guess.
Yeah.
And I mean, writing a campaign gives you the ability to do that. So that was,
Sure.
for me, it's just like I can make this campaign, and I know what, what sort of scenes I want to have happen
Mm-hmm.
in order to examine something and see, because like I can think about these things on my own, but whenever I have a group of players interacting with it,
Mm-hmm.
for me that's more insightful, I guess. So I just get a better look at what I'm trying to look at, I guess. And writing for me it's very satisfactory to me, because it's like I also think that like hidden, plot clues are very fun, and I've always been a big fan of, like, I think I've talked about this before, like when you watch people analyze Marvel movies, they're like, they did this here, and then it comes out, 3 movies later that ties into some like Easter egg in the background type thing. That kind of thing is super cool to me, so I enjoy trying to throw those in there, but that's one of the harder parts for sure.
So like, how do I guess let's start here. Like, where do you start when you're thinking about doing your own campaign?
So campaign 1, I started with, I kind of just wanted, because that was like during, I think I've talked about this before too. That was during like the Trump administration, and like there was all these like ties between him and like Putin, and I was like, this would be interesting if like what the players think is the BBEG is just a puppet. So I was like, okay, that's gonna be it. It's gonna be this guy. This
Isaac getting all political.
Whether or not that's what's actually happening in reality, I don't know. But I just thought it was an interesting concept. But so the BBEG is going to be this guy who's like running this empire. The like, TCs are going to have to like try to find this guy and like stop his evil plan. But when they get there, they realize he's not doing anything. He's just like maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
So that was where I started with campaign 1, and then it didn't even end up quite as insidious as I had originally written it out to be. But part of that is also like, so I have, man, it's complicated, I guess. I have a general idea of what I want to happen for the main, like the broadest of strokes is, there's your big bad guy. He's actually being controlled or told what to do by this other person that they're going to have to deal with after they find that out. And then you go in a little finer, and like, oh well, what is he doing that's so bad? And then okay, and then start writing in those pieces so that the players actually, oh, we don't like that guy for these reasons. You can't just be like, oh, he's a bad guy.
Right.
So doing that, and then going a little finer, and eventually different almost try to make like little like side adventures that can also give just like context for the larger things. It's best if I can make them have context for the larger things, but they can be self-contained as well if it's a good enough idea in my mind.
Okay.
And then some of the like most fun stuff is the back and forth with player backstories and trying to then they give me a backstory. I'm like, oh, okay, this is how this part of this backstory can fits in nicely here with this part of the main plot, or fits in nicely here with this side plot, and sort of interweaving those things so where that the players feel like they are a part of the world and a part of what is actively going on is fun for me.
So that's another thing that I was going to ask you about, because like how do you, because I think for a lot of people they have like an idea of a story, right, or like a concept, or like, oh, this is the bad guy, or like this is the conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you create this like 3-act play or whatever you want to describe it as and still maintain the ability for like are there things that you feel like I'm willing to compromise if this goes weird or sideways, or like essentially how do you like manage player agency against what you kind of have as this like loose structure of a plot, if you will? Or like, do you have a plot? I don't even know if that's an accurate way to describe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit more about campaign 2 as it is a bit fresher. The beginning of it is not quite fresh, but so with campaign 2, the idea. Okay, so the very first session, I sort of gave you guys this clue of this. There's this statue of this guy.
Yeah, dude.
And I like described it, and you guys like looked all fucking over it, and I was like, "It's just a statue, though." There's
no.
I just want you to remember the statue. It's not an interactive statue. There's nothing hidden within it. I just want you to make note of this statue.
You statue, man. So rad. Still thinking about it.
So it worked. I mean, I wanted you guys to remember the statue, and you did. So
we did. All right.
That was, so between that interaction and that final map that we played on, the triangle room, I had made that map like at the beginning of the session, like at the beginning of the campaign. Because I was like, this is where it's going to end. There's going to be, the ritual is going to be here. And so I gave you guys that statue of this guy, Reginald Bowley, and like halfway through the campaign, you guys end up like just happening to see that guy, which it was supposed to be at some point. Once you guys, hopefully, I like tried to really give you reasons to go see the Gilded Shadow. And at some point, like one of the times that you're walking towards the Gilded Shadow, I make you guys do a perception check, and if it's high enough, hey, you recognize that guy. Because he was around, in the neighborhood or walking away from the Gilded Shadow because he had been getting supplies from there.
Right.
So, like, I guess that there is, as far as player agency goes, you could have potentially killed him when you saw him, but it was pretty unlikely. Like, he had ways to get away, and he wasn't a pushover.
No.
So it would have taken, like, all of you being there, subduing him somehow without, arousing the suspicion of the Aegis or the guards because it's in a town. It had some fail safes to where you couldn't really kill him at that point. It was possible, but not probable. So I guess that's an example.
Like, what would have happened had we pulled it off or whatever? You know what I mean?
If you had killed him, then there would be like some other guy would have taken over the ritual, and it would have not been done quite as well.
His brother, Reginald Bowley.
Well, it was never Reginald Bowley, right? It was the thing that killed him. So
it was the thing that. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot. That's what it was.
Yeah,
He
it
was
was a
killed
thing
by
that
some.
it was killed by a slod
Okay.
who then was birthed from him.
Ugh, yucky.
Yeah.
Salat.
So yeah,
Because like I
that's
mean like that's one thing that intrigues me about building a, like I'm running into this a little bit with Strahd. It's just like it's hard because it's like it's a very big sandbox, but also like the game kind of gives you potential solutions to the problem, which is we are trapped in Barovia.
mhm.
Well, here's how you get out. You get your like fortunes read. Sorry, spoilers. You get your fortunes read, and you get these mystical items. I mean, it's like every other adventure. Like you get these
Yeah.
mystical items, and then you kill the big bad guy. But like, what if your players are just like, "Ah, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of that's like the sort of unwritten agreement, right? Is that you're as a player, you're trying to move the story along,
yeah,
and if you're not, I mean, first off, if you're not, that's a weird thing to do without having talked about it. If that's
yeah,
not, that could be an interesting like part of the plot is that you're not,
mhm,
you're not going to do anything until like some big spur comes and hits you. Um,
sure,
but secondly, like if their players aren't into the plot and you're trying to like you just want to play and they don't really for
yeah.
whatever reason, you can
They want to
just
play a
like
quick
spur them.
game.
You can just be like, okay, uh, something's going to attack you
Yeah,
if you're gonna sit here and do nothing, or something's attacking the village. All these
yeah,
people that are around, like all these innocent folks, are dying, and
right.
you, an adventurer who has the potential to do something about it, is doing nothing.
I won't because I don't like the DM.
Yeah.
So,
At which point it's like, why are we playing right now?
what are we doing, guys? It's a waste of time. Yeah. So one thing you mentioned is like you like to incorporate like side quests or whatever, like player
Mhm.
backstories. Like, how do you balance? Like, you built this world, right? And so I think a lot of people, I don't know, like, okay, my approach to the thing that I've kind of just tinkered around with, like, I don't have any intentions of like playing this game or anything anytime soon, or maybe at all. But I just have thought, like, yeah, like it'd be cool to like kind of write my own campaign and do my own kind of thing.
Mhm.
I've started with like themes of like I'd be really interested in like renewal and life and death and just like overarching campaign themes of like this is something I'd like to explore. And like kind of these like you mentioned at the very start, like, oh, I want to look at these allegories and I want to look at like I mean your first one was very much motivated by real world events, it sounds like.
Mhm.
And so I have this loose structure of like, okay, this is the circumstance or the environment that the world is in, and like the asteroid that's gonna blow up the entire world. Like this is happening no matter what, and my players just happen to live here, right? Like I've got this kind of like circumstance in mind. It's not that, but like
Yeah.
something like that. So I want to plop them in this kind of environment, but also like where do you balance when you're creating your own campaign some of those elements, you know what I mean? Like when do you step on the gas, when do you step on the brakes? Like these side quests, these like weaving in backstories, like how much do they interrelate? Is there like a place where pacing wise you just like, hey, we're gonna here's this side opportunity that doesn't really matter. Like is there something from campaign 2 that we did that was like aside from backstory stuff, it was like, well, this is just kind of side fun, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Ivia's Mansion was a side quest.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool.
But the reason I wanted to do it, um, is because I thought I had some like fun like encounter mechanical ideas
Hmm.
that I wanted to do, and I was like, well, how am I gonna like plug these in? Like just
Sure.
out of nowhere, there's gonna be these weird encounters, and
Yeah.
so I was like, well, what makes sense? And I was like, oh well, I guess it would make sense if they were if they were there for specifically to foil someone, like if it was traps for
Right.
a dungeon or something. And I was like, well, why would somebody do that? I'm like, oh, to hide like their precious collection of things. I'm like, well, even then though, why would they? What qualifications would they have to make something? Like, well, if they were a really strong, powerful wizard.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, well, why aren't they there? Well, maybe they.
Yeah.
Maybe they were.
Maybe
they died to their own creation by accident.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, okay, well, how can I make that work? And so I started like dropping these little bits of information about this person named Ivia, and it's like, oh yeah, you guys have all heard this name before.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be like Ivia, because no one ever knows what, because she was supposed to be this like shooting star up and comer wizard, and then suddenly she was not around anymore.
Yeah.
And people just thought that she had like blown herself up or something, which she kind of did.
Right. She flew too close to the sun.
But yeah, so then I just tangled it into, because Merton's daughter was had ties to the Aegis, and so I was like, okay, she's maybe working / attending, and that's like one of her projects is to do this research on this famous figure that is not much is known about her. And then maybe the Aegis is the only one who has like some of that information because she was a wizard. And then I was like, okay, well, Aegis has this, and then some other people have through the grapevine found out that maybe she had some treasure, and so I made the Gilded Shadow have part of the puzzle and the Aegis have part of the puzzle, and you guys having access to both of those makes it to where, oh hey, we could figure this out. We are the only people who know this much, because these people know some stuff, these people know some stuff, they will never ever talk to each other.
Never.
Yeah, so that was kind of a thing to make you guys, like, make the players feel like, oh, we have information that no one else has. Yeah. We should do something with it. And I felt that it also, another goal of that was to like make the world feel real. Like there's real things happening that aren't, not everything has to do with the main plot. A lot of things do, but not everything.
Right.
But yeah, you guys sat on that for a long time.
Well, it's kind of funny because like playing, like sometimes you pull on a thread and you're just like, we're going to be on this for a minute.
Yeah.
And there's other times where it's just like, I have no idea where to start with this, but I know that we've written it down in our quest log. But like Otherton, like we never did that. What was that going to be, or it like?
Well, that one I can't tell you too much about because that may come up again. But yeah, there was a whole like subset of stuff that was going to happen if you guys ever found that.
Gosh dang. Okay.
Which may still happen. I don't know. I may just reuse it.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, that was another little side quest that had stuff. I don't know if you... Okay, so early in the campaign, you like first handful of sessions, you guys ran into that monster at the carnival who was like about to kill a dryad. You chased it down, killed it. It had a bag of holding. Yeah, it was a slod.
Yeah, and all I had in it were empty jars? Yeah, what the freak is that about?
Later on, when you guys went into the last fight, that temple, one of those things was just a bunch of blood in jars. So they got it from somewhere else.
Okay. I don't remember that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, I remember you guys were like, what are these jars for?
Full circle, dude.
That's what they were for. They were just to get the Dryad's blood, because they needed Fey blood for part of the ritual.
Interesting. Okay, so going back to the start of this, like you kind of came into it with like, okay, I have an idea of this bad guy, right? Or this conflict, if you will, right? Starting there. And then you're like, okay, moving from the conflict to like potential side quests or like story involvement from the players. how do you like fill in the gaps like world build? Like that's something a lot of people like. I think a lot of people that do their own campaign like do it because they like that element or like want to world build or whatever. Like talk to me about like how if I'm developing my own, like what are some things that I can do to make sure that I'm like really painting the rest of the picture really well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the harder parts for me. And one of the things, ironically, that is the coolest part about it for me.
Mhm.
And I feel like I really failed in the first campaign outside of a couple cities. So in the second campaign, I've tried to keep it all on the northern side of one continent rather than the entire world, so I didn't have to fill out so much.
Before we move on, like you failed because why? Like what?
Well, in the
What?
first campaign, you guys had circumnavigated the globe, and like I maybe you guys felt different, but I didn't feel like a lot of the places you went through existed. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, oh, this is you passed through, good job, but it like even to me, like a lot of those places were not even close to fleshed out.
Hmm.
So having you pass through them felt incomplete. It was like you were passing through a wireframe and to get to the place where you were supposed to be.
Okay.
And like it didn't happen with every place, but it happened with too many for my liking.
Okay.
Uh, and so I tried to in the campaign too, like all the cities that were on the Ledric Sea. Like I gotta have at least something to make them real for me. So I was like, okay, the dock district of every one of those is painted a specific color, or at least shades of a specific color. So
Hmm.
every city, like I think, well, I got it here somewhere. Um, Takria was, I think, blue. No, purple. I think. What was it? Takria was purple.
Right.
The Takria, yeah, that district was purple. They had their magic specialization was abjuration and conjuration. So the magic shops there, run by the Aegis, were good at those things, and you had to like pay extra if you were going to get something outside of that specialty
Hmm.
from the Aegis. And like, I think Graylin was blue, but they were inland, so they didn't really have a dock district. Nethalon was red. Brable was orange, like a burnt orange. Brinport was yellow. Bloomshire was green. All these things like helped me, and they each had their own specializations for their magic shops, and all
Hmm.
those things helped me to sort of make those feel like they actually existed. And then Bloomshire, I told you guys about the lock system, and like how
Hmm.
those bridges, like however many bridges over the course of the lock, some of them went over, some of them went under, and just little things like that. That if I were going to plan out a city like that, how would it work? Like, how would you get across the lock if it's in the middle of the city? And like, well, some maybe they've tunnel under in some places and bridge over in others. Just things to make it feel like it's real. Yeah, because in the first one, like I said, it felt like there was too many wireframe cities for me.
Hmm.
So I tried to get just one or two things about each city that I could just quickly refer to and be like, okay, Renport's yellow.
Okay.
And I mean, I could do more than that. I would prefer to do more than that, but that's one of the harder things for me is like fleshing out a city when you're going to be there for like 2 minutes. I still want it to be real, but I also I can't spend hours
Yeah.
on it when it's like, oh, this was cool. Okay, we're leaving.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. So, did you have any like freak moments like in the campaign of like, well, this is different or this is forcing me to adapt on the fly or like, okay, like that was an interesting session. Now I've got to work on some stuff before next week to change what I thought was going. I don't know. Like, does that make sense? Were there any kind of instances where we altered the course of your overall structure?
Trying to think because I know that there have been. I'm trying to think of a specific example. Um, I don't know. I guess whenever you guys decided you were going to take on the Emancipators, uh, and really it would have been a much. It would have been very different had they been able to get out, because they tried to cast teleport, and Joe had already used his reaction, so it was up to Joe's foster dad or whatever, who happened to roll well enough to counterspell a teleport. If they had gotten away,
Yeah,
that could have been a mess for you guys.
for real.
And because like I had tried to drop hints of like they're casters, everyone.
Right.
Attention players. These guys are casters. They are
Right.
wizards. They know how to use spells. They will likely try to get away. You need to have counterspell ready for if they try to teleport out.
Yeah.
And then he used his reaction, and I was like, they're still gonna try.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
that was a thing, because it didn't seem like, I don't know, it didn't seem like the gravity of effectively picking a fight with the Aegis and the potential of getting caught doing it was fully considered. It seemed like you guys were just like, we're mad at this, we're gonna take care of it right now. And I was like, cool. And then you were like, I don't know how we're gonna do it. I was like, okay. And I sort of let Joe's dad sort of feed you a plan that might work, because I think that you guys had talked about like casting spells in the city, and I was like, that's going to be bad. That's like you're picking a fight with the Aegis inside the city versus picking a fight with the Aegis outside the city. Those are very different arenas.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, that episode was me like I was giving you a plan, and then you guys weren't really taking it. So I was like quickly trying to calculate, how is this going to go down when they pick a fight in the city?
Right.
And eventually you didn't. You went out into the wilderness, but yeah, that was definitely a moment where I was like, this could be real weird.
And so I am interested in that because like I feel like there's a difference between like writing a book or writing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this, because like players, I mean, you want them to tinker and play. You
Mhm.
want them to affect the world. Like being open to the potentialities of it. Like I just feel like let me ask you this. Were there certain parts of it that you were like you had some of it planned out from the very beginning, obviously, but like, was there anything that you did in the middle of the campaign that was like fresh, out of nowhere, whatever? Like, was there any writing or planning that you did in the middle of the campaign?
I mean, there definitely was. Whether or not you would consider it like fresh, I don't know, because like things about Shalandro changed in sort of in the middle of the campaign as it sort of started to take form. I was like, this would be more interesting if Shalandro was, XYZ. So things like that changed. And then like to sort of harken back about, because like it's the, if you guys had picked a fight with the Aegis in a city, that then becomes, it's okay. It would be similar to when you guys picked a fight with Traylor in campaign 1.
Yes.
It becomes okay, how can I like get them out of this situation? Okay, we're doing a one shot where there are these students who are like maybe not too keen on what's going on, and they've caught wind of maybe there's some prisoners down here and they're going to check it out. And yeah, that was the thing that caught me off guard, because you guys went in there and I was like, he's super bad, hey, he's super bad. You guys probably shouldn't fight him. He's super, super bad in his own house. And then Joe's like, I'm going to punch him. It's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, but also I feel like sometimes like, hey, this is the like this is the bad guy. This is like the content,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
like, okay, well
absolutely.
let's engage with it. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh frick, well,
Yeah, I mean, I'm well aware that me saying that makes it just a huge shiny button, but like,
well, and sometimes like as a player, like this is what we're being presented
Mhm.
with, like, oh, we're here, this is it. So I guess let's play with it. And
Yeah.
it's less like I think the warning signs are less apparent than it may feel because it's just like, well, what else? We're on this. This is the road we're on.
Yeah,
Like, it's
like,
hard to like see the whole. You know what I mean? I don't know
oh
if that
yeah,
makes any sense.
absolutely, yeah, because you obviously aren't going to know the things that I know, which is
Yeah,
why I kept on trying to emphasize, he's a real bad dude, and then not only that, but you guys weren't. The entire party was not there, and I was like,
yeah.
okay, well they're not. They're just going for recon. Great, I can give them all kinds of little tidbits of information. Like there's so many clues I can give them. They
Party,
made it inside. This is great.
flip
And then
the
they're like, we're gonna fight
party.
him.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I feel like anytime I watch Critical Role or whatever, like that's what they do. They're like, okay, here's our plan. Just getting some information and facts, and then it's just like, no, we're in. We're gonna f around with that.
Yeah,
Oh man.
yeah, and like the Critical Role campaign 2 definitely played a role in the way I wrote my campaign 2,
Mhm.
in the fact that like the final handful of sessions or whatever was not something that was known in the world necessarily. Like a select few people knew about it, and that was very similar to the way I had envisioned the end of my campaign 2 going. Is that like, yeah, you guys have found out about this thing. You're not sure, how bad it is necessarily. No one else even knows about it,
Mhm.
and then you guys keep getting these little clues like, oh, this might be real bad. And by the
Yeah.
time you figure out it's real bad, it's like we can't tell anyone because no one is gonna A, believe us, or B, like be ready to do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the plan anyway.
Yeah. You have any like inspiration for campaign 2 like you did with 1?
The campaign 2 ending was more inspired by mechanics. I was reading through the different like outer planar like rules and descriptions and stuff and optional rules, and like these are all super cool. What if I made a campaign where like the option to go to these different planes was available?
Right.
And that's where it started. And then so the idea was that originally that Shalanjo had been, they messed up a ritual to pull him in, his consciousness strewn across the outer planes,
Right.
and maybe like the players have to go to those outer planes to like shut down each thing, and that was where the idea started, and then it just sort of molded into what it was from there. Hey, you guys
So
didn't
like
actually
just
end up going to many other planes.
no, we did not. In fact, which is like really a shame because like we had like unmitigated access to Terminus. It felt like it's like we could go friggin' anywhere,
Yeah,
but it just
that was.
wasn't.
I mean, that the idea of Terminus was very early in the stage too. It was like I'm going to give them, an ability to obtain access to all these planes
Yeah.
and see what they do with it. And I had like, a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit ready for any plane that you might have chosen. And if you had chosen one, it was going to be like, all right, we'll get to that next session, and I would flesh it out. But but yeah, there was like a
It's
little bit.
I never felt like we had. I mean, like we went to Carcerai or Carcerai or whatever because
Yeah.
like oh my mom's there. It never felt like we had like let's just wander through the abyss. Like that sounds fun. Like
Well,
like
you
it would
tried
have
it. You almost got killed.
yeah. There's a reason we went there though, right?
Yeah, you were gonna try to find your mom. because you
That's
knew
right.
that she was there at one point.
Yeah.
But and then those things that ran at you guys, like I I really think that you guys could have killed those if you weren't
Yeah.
like
We got
trying
super
to
unlucky.
postpone and like clump up.
Yeah. It was so funny how bad and sour that went so quickly. But yeah, like I would be super down for like a interplanar kind of game. It just felt like we had all these like threads
Yeah.
in the material plane and not much else. But it was kind of,
Yeah,
um,
and the clockwork heart of Emodron or whatever, that you could have tried to go to Mechanus
yes.
and get that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. This is funny, like sometimes I don't know, for me, like as a player, it was always like Jace, my character, he's gonna go do what matters to him the most.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's tough because it's like, all right, we got this team of 7 people or 6 people. I want to go help my family. So if you guys are along for the ride,
Yeah, and that's that's kind of why I don't want to like give you here's the plot. Please follow this road. I want to like drop these little things, and ideally, like hopefully, the players grab onto something and be like, this could help me do X.
yeah,
And like, great. And then I try not to limit what each individual thing does. Like if you guys had gone to try to get the clockwork heart, maybe that does help you like more directly than originally was
Right.
apparent.
Right.
Especially if a player is like, I think that if we do this, it could help us with this.
Right.
If it makes sense, and because I don't have everything like in stone. If it makes sense, likely that thing is going to help you do that.
Yeah. Okay, so look at the time. I want to get this in too because I
Okay.
kind of want to just be like, okay, the last little bit that we have, I want to ask you for like I've never built one. I have an idea,
Okay.
and so I was thinking it'd be kind of interesting to kind of like workshop just a tiny bit here.
All right.
I don't know, maybe not.
That sounds fun to me.
For you, it was kind of like you had some inspiration from some things. I like before it was like, yeah, well, I started with my conflict for Bagger, but like really it stemmed from like, oh, I was inspired by this thing specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like one thing that I've really kind of given some thought to, and we can talk about here and kind of workshop it together. Sorry, the room is hot. I opened my window and there's definitely a skunk outside. It's like, man alive, something got sprayed. Very good thought.
We're workshopping something.
Oh, yeah, workshop. So
Okay.
I have an idea that revolves around like it's similar to mechanically. Like I think it's super interesting. Like a lot of people struggle with the idea of like rest, right? And like how much people get back on a rest. Like I think that's super interesting to play with. Like okay, D&D heroes are like crazy like they are heroes, and part of it's like superhero strength to like completely get everything back on just 8 hours of sleep, right? And I've played around with this idea, like what if that's something that's common in one place and not at all in another place? I've played around with this idea of there kind of being this central planar hub for these heroes, but then there's these outer hubs where it's like they're less, like they still benefit from where they're from, but like those realms are less benefited from some of the mechanical rules that make you like otherworldly, right? So like for whatever reason, there's a reason for some of them to go to this place where it's like somehow it gets out that like there's these people that can like take a nap and recover grievous wounds. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine like it's like, whoa, dude, that guy lost his arm. He slept on it for 8 hours and he's got it back. You know what I mean? Like, or like there's another realm where it's just like magic is real, but like only cantrips. And so the fact that somebody could do the things that these people do, I don't know. I've thought about like something like that where it's like mechanically that sounds super interesting to me. But also what sounds super interesting is this idea of like life, death, immortality, resurrection. I don't know. Like I kind of want to play around with these themes. Like I think about like how do I put some of those themes into a world where it's interesting, engaging, that there's conflict. Like I'm not sure. I have not spent hardly any time on this, but I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea, interesting concept. Like, how do I weave this all together? Maybe this workshopping idea does not sound as awesome as I thought, but it's like,
So where I would start with that is if like your players are the only people who either, you know, have magic or the only people who can long rest and get and recover from things.
right.
Where what is going to challenge them? So if they're the only ones with magic, what especially in the early levels, like I can see like, oh, something else followed them through and it's, you know, it's the evil thing. But like especially in the early levels, what is there to challenge someone? It's the same question as like if you're playing, if you have a death ray from the future and you go back to the, you know, 1800s, like what is there to challenge you?
Yeah.
Like, what makes it to where you don't just auto win everything always? Because
Humanity.
that gets boring.
Oh, well, I think that there's, like, I've thought about, like, the responsibility of wielding such a thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
In that
And,
case, do you have the right players for that campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Because
that's
a
another
lot
thing,
of
too.
D&D players are like, you know, kill it with fire and we'll sort it out later.
Exactly. That's another thing. I mean, getting away from this workshop idea for a minute is just like, did your table influence your specific campaign development?
Yeah, I mean, it of course does. I Everyone gave me a backstory of some degree,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on how much of that backstory was like things that had to be overcome, that I mean, the more you have to like, the more you give me that, well, these are the things that I will have to overcome if these things happen. Those things are probably going to make it into the campaign. If you give me a backstory that was like I won all the time,
Yeah.
and be like, okay, we'll shove that off to the side and maybe get to it sometime.
Right.
Because it's like, that's not interesting. That's not who. What? Go play a video game if you want to win all the time. This is at
Yeah.
least for the kind of campaign that I'm going to run. It's going to be like you have to make progress, both like you know, combat mechanically, and like hopefully you'll have to consider your character will consider things and decide what, you know, which of these options gives me, you know, what I want for the near and far and long term. Like, just, you know, make interesting decisions, have interesting like choices, and not choices that it's like, oh well, easy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, in my backstory, I always solved everything with a firebolt. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
okay. There was a bomb with a fuse. What are you gonna do? I'll firebolt the fuse. Good job. Moving on.
Yeah. I mean, like, narratives about conflict are not narratives.
Yeah, exactly. And it's And I get that some people want to play games so that they can be the winner, and that's fine.
No.
But it's not interesting to me, and if that's what you give me as a backstory, it's not going to take the spotlight very often, just because it's over quickly, right? It's not like if it's not difficult, then it's done very fast.
No. Like I usually it's funny. I only ever play 2 video games at a time. Like I have my like multiplayer games where it's like competing against other people and that's
Hmm.
hard. Um and then I have my one player game and I only ever really have one player game at a time. And my intent is usually for it to be relaxing, enjoyable, but it doesn't mean that there's not conflict or challenge. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm just going to turn this on easy mode, but like the conflict comes from like stakes, story, like I'm watching a movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even though it's easy, there's still a word for it. Like there's still stakes involved. There's still like, oh, like yeah, I'm controlling, like for example, I'm playing Breath of the Wild right now.
Okay.
That game can be really hard, but it can also be not so hard. At
Hmm.
least in my experience so far. I've only played like 10 hours of it. And I've died a lot of times, but I'm also old, not very good at video games anymore. Um, but like, oh, okay, there's a narrative, there's a story, there's conflict, like even though it's like an easy game or whatever, like Link has to overcome something, you know,
Yeah.
and there's just enough of a challenge for me as a player that it's like, oh yeah, like I'm doing something, like I'm accomplishing things. But it's funny to say that about the video game. I'm accomplishing things.
Look at my life.
Yeah, I've been sitting in the dark for an hour. But yeah, so I mean, like,
Yeah, I mean it's for me those types of video games are it's even the video games that are the like super easy. It's still like there's still an exploration aspect of them for me that I get to
Mhm.
like I get to explore something, or if it's a game that I've played a million times and like the original Zelda,
Mhm.
like it's still fun for me to go back and just like run through it and do like
Yeah,
I don't know. It's still fun because it's part of it's nostalgia, um, but part of it is that there it's not a gimme still. Like I still can
yeah,
die,
right.
and part of it is still just like because I can die, making progress feels good. Like I
Like, I think it speaks to the fact that there's like mechanical challenge, and then there's also just narrative challenge,
yeah.
where it's just like I I loved the original God of War. I haven't. I've played like maybe 5 hours of the new God of War, and like the original God of War, I got when my first kid, my son, was like 0 to 6 months, and it's just like babies just sleep all the time, and you're tired all the time, so it's like I don't want to do anything other than play a video game every time. Like, okay, I did my turn. Like, it's my wife's on right now, and I can either go take a nap, and it's like I've already done that today, or whatever. Right? Like my point being that like the second God of War, now my life is just so busy. Like it's just insane. So I just haven't done it. And like part of me is just like I want to turn it on easy mode because like I don't want to wail away and hack and slash forever. Like I just want to know what the story is. Like how
Oh
do
yeah,
Kratos and his son, you know what I mean? Like maybe your character is super good at a lot of things, but if you don't provide, you know,
yeah. It feels
narrative
hollow.
challenge in the way.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. It's like no one wants to go. No one wants to watch the movie about the Lord of the Rings where the eagles just fly them to the mountain and it's over.
Yeah. Absolutely. But if you've played the Lord of the Rings games back on like PS2 or GameCube or whatever, like those games were a lot of fun and not super hard. Like,
I didn't play them.
oh man, they're classics. They're so good. At least I don't remember them being hard. But like enough of a challenge? I don't know. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
But you felt like, I mean, in spite of the story that you wanted to tell, you still had to adapt it for us.
No, yeah. I mean, that's. Um, I feel like that's the plan every time. Trying to make. And I don't always end up able to do this. And I rely on players like the characters' relationships to make them want to help each other, and then at least one of them wants to do the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's better if I can like just give some kind of thread from the player's backstory that leads into something that I had, originally come up with as a plot device.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one of the sort of side plots was the Aegis versus the Aftermath. And that just came about because when I was world building, originally the evil thing at the end was inspired by mechanics of planar stuff. But the world itself was just inspired by like, if there was magic,
yeah,
do I think that would try to be someone we tried to like make rules for it? Like, yeah, someone would probably try to make rules for it.
100%.
And so I was like, okay, well, why? And then what made it to where people were willing to listen to these rules? So I, wrote in this whole thing about there was this big war, and I ended up using that to tie it into campaign 1 in a way. So, and then out of that war comes this thing called the Aegis, and people are, at the beginning of when it first comes up, people are like, yeah, this is what we needed after this. It's like, just like in real life, like after World War II, like these
right.
new programs come out of the U.S. government, and people are like, yeah, this is exactly what we need. And then, the war fades from memory, and people are like, why are we doing this? Yeah. This stuff is ruining everything. And it's like, well, different time, different response. So now there's this aftermath that's like, we don't need this place anymore. And and I feel like that was, something that very easily could be an allegorical to politics today.
Sure.
So yeah, that was a thing, and then I didn't know how that was going to go. I purposefully didn't write which way I even wanted that to go, because I wanted you guys to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And then you guys let Jensimar get away, and who knows what he's up to now.
Let him get away.
I mean, I know what he's up to now, but
but like earlier, we were talking about this potential idea that I have about, there's potentiality. My players could be way more powerful than the common folk, right? And so, like, are my players up for that? Do you think that there were things that you wanted to do that were lost because of your table, or like things that you were pleasantly surprised, like, oh, because my table is for this, I can do this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, because the table was what we had, I figured that anything that was like, anyone asking for help was going to get it, pretty much. So whenever, you guys ran into Merton getting arrested, and essentially he was like, I'll let you out if you do this thing for me. That's an easy one. My table is going to take that. Most tables I feel like are going to take that. But yeah, my table, I didn't have any doubt that you weren't going to take that. And as far as things that ended up going not as I planned because of the table, the Aftermath thing very nearly went a very different way. We ended up sort of retconning it because Harry was like, I didn't want to do that the way that it happened, so I didn't do that. I was like, okay, since you're the one who did it and you're the one who's saying it, sure, we'll retcon it. Sure. But yeah, that was almost a great deal of tension. It was just like let out.
Something, that's for sure.
But it ended up going, back, and we ended up going back and fixing it, and I felt like it was still interesting. I think it would have been more interesting had you captured Jensimar, but
yeah. Or like figured out how to like find him, you know what I mean? But it felt like, how do we do this? Not really sure. Oh, this thing over here happened, and I couldn't remember what it was, but it was just like, well, I guess we'll attend to that.
That was essentially once he got away, you're not likely to, he knows how magic works. He's like basically a leader of this group who is going. He knows exactly what he's going up against in the Aegis.
Right.
So if he doesn't want to be found, he's not going to be found.
Right.
So yeah,
So he thinks.
he's in the wind. And then your well, I'll tell you that the deal with Sid was not written originally. That was something that came out later.
Yeah.
He was originally he was gonna, there was gonna be something that where he was going to come and like just wreak havoc on the material plane because of the corruption that he had suffered from the Abyss. But as the game went on and you didn't really like the amount that you had talked to him and the amount that you had heard from him still fit with this new idea that I had. We're like, this all makes complete sense for me, and so I'm gonna write it in there. And he ended up being like this sort of linchpin for Shalandro. And I don't think I told you guys, if you didn't kill him and that ritual had taken place, Shalandro got a lot stronger. Like he had 2 eye beams during that fight, and like one of them blinded you and did a little bit of damage, and like one of them like charmed you, but it wasn't working most of the time because of different mechanics that you guys had.
Right.
If he had like sucked the essence from Sid, he got 2 more eye beams that were did lots of damage. One of them was like a disintegration ray, so if he killed you with it, you were just done. And he also like got to regen every turn if he killed Sid.
Jeez.
So,
yeesh.
Yeah, and then that was so cool because I had sort of hinted that your god was told you like you're gonna have to make a choice,
right?
And then I sort of let that marinate with you.
Yeah.
And I was so happy to hear you like say it again later. I was like, oh, sweet, he remembered. Yeah. And then you got down there and it's like, yeah, you're gonna have to make a choice. And then you going, we make our own choices, and he banished him. I was like, cool.
That was so much fun, dude. We had a choice canal strat. Banishing somebody that's banishing someone else.
Yeah, that was very cool. And that's okay. that was an freak moment for me, because I was like, how does this work now? And I had to figure it out on the fly, but it was great. I loved it.
Good stuff. It was fun. It's good. Okay.
All right.
Cool.
There you go.
Well, tidbits, interesting insights into our most recent campaign, but also especially in light of like wanting to create your own campaign. Hopefully, I've got ideas, and if I ever get to a place where I can play freaking D&D again, maybe I can enact them.
Yeah. And we'll probably go a little deeper into some of the aspects of it in the near future in this podcast. But yeah, I feel like that was a good start for where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely, 1000%.
So yeah, thanks for chatting with me about it. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you next time.